Welcome to today's lecture on digestion. As has become the tradition, first let's start with a science joke. If you've always wondered where those twisty light bulbs came from, you now know that it came from a combination of a light bulb and a twisty ice cream cone. The question is, do you know if that's incomplete dominance or codominance? I hope you picked incomplete dominance because it has characteristics of both parents combined together. Hopefully you found the spot in your packet that has a space for you to take notes on the digestion lecture as it's going along. First of all, there's 4 separate stages of digestion. I'll briefly describe each one, and then we'll go back and look at some of them in detail. To begin with, ingestion simply means food entering the body. And obviously, the where part of that would be through the mouth. Digestion is the process of breaking food down into molecules the body can use. Mechanical digestion refers to parts of the body that are physically smashing the food. That would include your mouth, in your mouth, your teeth and tongue, which push the food around and crunch it up. Your stomach and small intestines do a process called peristalsis, and we'll talk and watch about that a bit later. But it's basically just the physically mixing or pushing of the food that also helps to digest it. Chemical digestion is just as it would seem, using enzymes or molecules produced by the body to digest the food. This occurs in your mouth, in your stomach, and your small intestines. Absorption is the part of the digestive process where molecules leave the circulatory system and enter the blood. And then elimination is simply getting waste out of the body, which in this case is going to be feces. Before we leave this slide, let's talk a little bit more about where food gets absorbed. Basically, the 3 sites we want to talk about are the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. Your stomach basically absorbs only very small molecules. We're talking here about water and alcohol. Now, a reason that your parents serve food when they're serving alcohol is that food in the stomach will slow the absorption of alcohol. The small intestine is where most of the digestion and absorption takes place. It's called the small intestine because it's more narrow than the large intestine, but in fact, it's much, much longer. In the small intestine, water, again, and food molecules are now absorbed into the bloodstream. The large intestine is largely responsible for the absorption of water from what's left, along with a few trace minerals, and we talked about the bacteria in your gut help to make vitamin K. And I guess some more notes with elimination, where the rectum would be the last part of the digestive system. It's storing the food until the anus is a sphincter muscle, opens up so that you can release the food from the body. Now a few parts that have to do with ingestion. The first of these words that we want to talk about is the epiglottis. And it's basically a cover over your trachea so that food does not go down your windpipe. So if you see right here, as you swallow, this should go down so that food doesn't go down your trachea, but instead goes down your esophagus behind it. Now, if you take anatomy, you'll learn more about this, but your trachea is lined with rings of cartilage that always keep it open. The esophagus is muscular, and so it's kind of closed, if you will, unless a food bolus is going down it. Bolus is our next word. That's basically a fancy word for food ball. So I added a little blue bolus over here so you could tell what we're talking about. The soft palate is over here, And its job is to prevent food from going into your nasal cavity as you swallow. So it should kind of close over here. So again, the food is directed towards your esophagus. If you blow milk out your nose because someone made you laugh, your small palate is unable to do its job. As the air is rushing back out, the soft palate doesn't stay in place, and again, the milk goes out your nose. The esophagus then is simply the tube behind the stomach, behind the trachea, and that's where the food goes on its way towards your stomach. This little video over here demonstrates how peristalsis works. Peristalsis is basically the pushing of food through the digestive system. So when you swallow something or drink something, it doesn't just drop all the way into your stomach down a hollow tube. Rather, it's pushed bit by bit down your esophagus by the muscular action of peristalsis. So if you've ever swallowed something like hot chocolate that's really too hot, you can kind of feel it slowly burning its way down to your stomach. That's because that food, or the water, the milk, the hot chocolate, is not just dropping down there, but it's slowly being pushed. Now flip the page and let's move on to the stomach. The stomach is responsible for both mechanical and chemical digestion. Again, mechanical means something's physically being done to mix the food around, and chemical would be the result of enzymes or chemicals being released. First, we want to talk about two different sphincters that control what goes in and out of your stomach. A sphincter really just means a circular muscle that kind of opens and closes. The first of these is the cardiac sphincter, and it's the opening between your esophagus and your stomach. When it opens, it allows food to go then again from the esophagus into the stomach, and it closes to prevent that food and stomach acid from going back up into your esophagus. So in theory, it's a one-way door. Acid reflux occurs when that cardiac sphincter doesn't completely close, and as the stomach contracts and churns, it splashes food and the stomach acid back into the esophagus. The esophagus isn't designed to be protected against that stomach acid, and you feel a burning sensation. Thus, the sort of generic term for acid reflux is heartburn. The pyloric valve then is down here, so let's back up. The cardiac sphincter was up here, the pyloric valve is down here. It's also a sphincter, and some books will call it the pyloric sphincter. In either case, it controls the movement of chyme from the stomach to the small intestine. Chyme is simply another fancy science word for a pasty substance that's a combination of chemicals and partially digested food. As we move on to chemical digestion, we'll look at basically the mouth, the stomach, and the small intestine. First of all, in your mouth, amylase is released from your salivary glands. And so you can see them up here underneath your tongue and sort of the side. All of these produce saliva along with some enzymes. Amylase, we know it's an enzyme because it ends in ASE, works on carbohydrates. So it starts the breakdown of carbohydrates for digestion. If you take a regular soda cracker and you chew on it long enough, eventually it will turn sweet as the amylase in your mouth has broken the cracker down and started to digest it, and then you taste the glucose molecules that are part of the cracker. In your stomach, we have two important chemicals that are added, HCl or hydrochloric acid, and its job is twofold. One, it kills bacteria, and every food that we eat or that we drink is going to have some bacteria with it, so this is your body's defense against that. Secondly, it lowers the pH so that the enzyme pepsin can work. And as you'll learn later, pepsin starts the digestion of protein. Continuing with chemical digestion, just to define, the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. And this is where most of the chemical digestion takes place. In addition to the pancreas, which you see down here, the pancreas releases a whole bunch of digestive enzymes. And you can see that there's a little duct to take those things from the pancreas to the small intestine. They work on all three. Some of the enzymes from the pancreas work on carbohydrates, some on proteins, and some on fats. Bile is produced by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and then released via the bile duct into the small intestine. And it specifically works to break fat molecules apart. And so people have had their gallbladders removed. Sometimes you get gallstones, and you get little stones in here, or kind of hardened pieces of the bile. And then as the body tries to release it, it squeezes the gallbladder. Nothing can go through. That's very painful. So sometimes you have your gallbladder removed. Your diet may have to be adjusted a bit then to reduce the amount of fat in your meals. So again, bile is made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, works in the small intestine to digest fat. The small intestine is where the digestion is finished and absorption takes place. Again, we talked about peristalsis, but here's a place to write a definition. First of all, write small intestine, absorption, and digestion. Peristalsis is the muscular contractions that move and mix food and chyme as it goes through the digestive system. So the esophagus, the stomach, and the small intestines would have peristalsis occurring. Villi are folds in the lining of the small intestine, and that simply gives it a lot more surface area to increase the absorption of nutrients and water. The last slide here is on enzymes, and if you would write, enzymes speed up reactions, and we remember that they end in ASE. Not all of them, but when you see ASE, that's an indication you're probably looking at an enzyme. You're going to look up the functions of the enzymes you see on the table on page 878 in your textbook. And it will clearly tell you what kind of food it works on, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, glucose, whatever, and where it is found in terms of where it's made and where it's used. So that's the end of our lecture for today. Now you know more about digestion. Thank you for listening.